Oh, thank you for meeting with me, Hannah. I'm glad you've got your cup of coffee there, all the
Good
comforts,
to go.
everything set up. So I know you as my EMDR supervisor and clinical psychologist, but I'm really looking forward to hearing about your journey because I didn't know you at the beginning of it.
Hmm.
So if we go right back to the beginning, where did you where did you first become interested in psychology?
Ooh, when was that seed first planted? I think when I look back at how I was in my school days, because I didn't initially even do psychology as A level, but I did sociology and I loved studying about human behaviour. And I was always interested in the mental health aspects. I remember my A-level sociology teacher talking about the impact of behaviour and talking about going to a mental health unit. And he told this story about he was with a group of people and everybody was like, oh, look at all those people with mental health problems behaving really weirdly because they were making a cup of tea and putting like three of the plastic cups together to make that cup of tea. And I'll always remember this story. And then he said he went and got a cup of tea and realised that with one plastic cup, that it was too hot and you couldn't bear it. So actually, the behaviour that they were all saying was weird and due to mental health challenges was like normal behaviour to stop people from burning themselves. And that story just stuck in my head about really understanding people's behaviour and why they did what they did. And I can remember being at school and always interested in the kids that struggled. So we
Mhm.
always used to have like this is when I was like 14, 15, and you'd have the group that had the reputation of being the naughty kids and they like weren't doing the exams and they'd be put in the room. And when I look back at it now, I can see the same stories was there with them that they'd had difficult upbringings. Nobody was really nurturing them and looking after them at home. They were lucky if they could get into school. And it just made me just super interested in human behaviour, really. But then my pivotal moment really was doing crap on my first A levels. So I did sociology, history, and RE. Got my best grade in sociology, and I did really badly in my other two subjects. I was predicted like A's. I don't know what went wrong. Um, but because of that, then I had to have a plan B. I was going to go to uni to do history teaching. I think back now and I think, God, what career path that would have been. Um, and I went to college and found out about psychology A level. So I don't think I even knew that that was really a subject before then, and something that you could do. So I ended up doing psychology and business studies A level at college. Absolutely loved it. Came out with two A grades and then applied for psychology degree and just was just inspired by the work really and just really
Yeah.
interested.
I
Mm.
I love your stories. I love that it feels really profound, that story about the cups and the cups of tea.
Yeah,
Um, where yeah, just reminds us that we can't judge. We have to really try and understand something, don't we?
yeah.
And then that story that must have been so devastating first time round, not getting the A levels you were expecting. And yet you
Yeah,
look back and you're like almost like, oh, thank goodness for that.
I know. Isn't that interesting? And people do say, don't they? Whatever happens, it happens for a reason. But when you're in the thick of it, and I remember that devastation, thinking, oh my God, I'm thick, I'm stupid, I'm not going to be able to do a degree. Um, and it was awful. There wasn't huge expectations on me before me and my sister went to uni. Like our family were not academic or anything like that. Nobody had really been to uni and followed that pathway that we probably started really. But yeah, now I think, thank God,
Yes,
because
yes.
because I would not have wanted to be a teacher. Much of my family are.
Yeah. So then psychology degree.
Mm.
And then what sparked your interest? Were you kind of straight away then interested in clinical psychology?
Mm.
And what
I
came next?
I think I was always interested in the like our modules were called abnormal psychology when we
I
were
remember
undergrads.
that.
I'm
Yes,
sure they've changed the name of it now, but I was
they
always
they have.
more interested in that um, throughout my degree. I always worked. I worked more or less full time when I was studying my degree, and for 2 years I worked. With my mum in the post office and just like an admin job, which was great. But then I got a job in a home for people with learning difficulties.
Mhm.
So my third year, I think maybe my second, third year, I was doing that work. And again, seeing the what was behind people's behavior and getting to really understand people and just supporting them to live like good quality of life and take people out and I really just enjoyed that work, so started to think about working in that field. And then I think I worked on the mental health helplines. The organisation would have been NSF, National Schizophrenic Fellowship, I think it was called then. I don't know. I think it's evolved over time. But
Okay.
you were like a crisis service and it was voluntary. And it was a support line. So people would basically be phoning in that were struggling, suicidal, really risky. And I just really enjoyed the conversations and helping people. So that would have been my third year in my degree. And then I did my thesis on adult survivors of child sexual abuse. I did like a discourse analysis, which is analysing loads of interviews and data and pulling themes out, and just got really interested in that field. And again, the hidden stories behind why people are behaving the way that
Yeah.
they do. And when I think about my emphasis now with trauma, when you think even back then, people were struggling with the mental health because of the sexual abuse and things that had gone before. So
Yes.
that
Yeah.
just spiked an interest then.
Yeah. And then were you hearing the same sort of messages that I was hearing towards the end of my degree around, oh, you'll never get an assistant psychologist post, or you'll never get onto clinical training? Um,
Yes,
yes.
definitely. And not knowing anybody that had done it. So I don't remember anybody coming into um talk to us. Oh, actually, there might be one person in the. I think we might have done like a counselling psychology. Oh, I can't even remember what they're called, like modules, but they
Hmm.
weren't called modules. But we did one on counselling psychology, and the lady that taught on that was a counselling psychologist. Um, but she didn't share much about the practical experience of being out in the field working as a psychologist.
Okay.
So I don't feel that anybody ever like sold that
Mm,
idea to me or planted that seed. I don't know where, but I would have started applying for assistant psychology posts, but I can't remember how long it took me to get an assistant psychology post. Yeah, but was told,
yeah.
you'll really struggle. Um, I think so. I did get one. Oh God, I'm being vague
Mm.
now because I can't quite remember what
No, don't
year.
worry. What
Nine.
what client group were you working with?
Well, it was through my experience of learning disabilities with working in the home during
Yeah,
the
yeah.
back end of my degree. I got a job in Birmingham working with a learning disability population, and then my job changed a lot there. I I I think I might have just gone like from my degree by the November time after finishing my degree. I think I managed to get an assistant's post then,
Hmm.
which feels quite quick because of
Yeah.
how impossible
Yeah.
it was. But I just remember applying for loads and loads, never knowing anybody else who had done it. Got this post in Birmingham. I remember going to my interview and coming home and getting on the M6 the wrong way to get home and like going completely the opposite direction. So that's a
So I've
funny
used up my brain
story.
power. I can't.
And there was no phones and no Google Maps in those days to figure out where I
Oh,
was.
I've got a similar wrong way on the motorway story. from being about that age and missing a junction, and then my dad going, oh, it took you a long time to realise, didn't it? And being like, "Mm."
Yes.
Yes.
But that's what I remember about that interview. Oh dear, that's funny.
Oh, bless you.
Yes. Yeah,
So then assistant post in learning disabilities, and then
and
from there on to clinical training, or yeah.
more or less, I think I did 1 year, I did 2 years as an assistant, and I think I applied every year to get
Mhm.
on the course.
Yeah,
But there was loads of people applying, as is still the case as far as I
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and not many places were offered for interview. I felt like I was lucky in one way because, like, the first year of my learning disability post, I worked in a multidisciplinary team, and it was very behavioural, the work that we were doing. And then in the second year, I went to work with somebody else who had come from an adults mental health team, and she was bringing her adult slant on things to the learning disability um, work. So she was doing like one-to-one talk therapy with clients with learning disabilities when nobody was doing that work.
Mm,
So I was working closely with her, and I got to do a lot of that stuff as well. And we developed like a specialism around bereavement and helping clients
mhm.
recover from bereavement in a talk way rather than the previous work, which would have been working with carers and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
behavioural stuff. So I think because I'd had the two jobs, I could really see them as almost being two separate
yeah,
assistant
yeah. That sounds
posts.
great.
Because
Yeah.
I'd applied for loads of assistant posts, hardly got any interviews, and never got on the
Mm,
interviews when I did. So I think that helped my form.
yes.
But in saying that, it was the second year of applying, and so this is back in the day before ChatGPT and all the online stuff. We would just like beg, borrow anybody else's application form that we can see, and we didn't have the online resources. I think today you'd probably have like a massive information that could be thrown at you to try and decipher and put your application in. But
Oh, I'm
so
sure. I remember we had where I worked as an assistant, there were sort of three of us, and regularly sort of two trainees would come on placement.
yeah,
And we had this folder of like just different interview questions that people had shared, and it was like, friends of friends of friends. It was like really random.
yeah.
And sometimes it would be like, these questions come from that university, and these ones come from that university. Um,
Mm.
but it would, you'd kind of look at those, wouldn't you, and imagine what you might say in answer to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all that work. And it just felt like such a privilege to be like close to the trainees and have them on placement with you because that's what you were aspiring to be, and everybody told you how impossible it was to get there. So it was yeah, always really valuable, wasn't it, to do that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So then you got onto training.
Yes, so I was reserved for interview as well, so I didn't even get interview first time round. Um, Birmingham were late interviewing; they were like middle of April. Lucky for me, this is what I always say. I always think there was a bit of luck in the journey. So by the time their interviews come, people had already been offered places in the interviews that were earlier.
Oh,
So.
okay. So if they'd got their first choice, they then would have ditched their Birmingham interview.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see.
so I was on the wait list, so I managed to get on there. Yeah, so went to interview day, speaking to the other candidates that was there. Um, Everybody was like PhD that they'd already done PhDs
Mm.
in loads of different stuff. One of my best friends now, I remember talking to her, and she'd done a PhD, and I just thought, oh my God, all these super clever people. Here I am, failed my first A levels, but somehow have got here. I thought they're all way better than me. There's no chance I'm getting offered a place here. And I just think that switched something in me. And I was just like, I'm just gonna like make the most of the situation and like be me because I've got nothing to lose because I'm not gonna get on anyway. So, and I
Nice.
don't usually have that like mindset, but it was really helpful in that
Yeah, yeah,
moment. Because usually I'd be panicking and thinking, oh my God, what are they going to ask me?
yeah. Oh, well done you.
But the
Um,
interview was quite a hard experience. Did you find that? Where did you do your training?
I trained at Surrey.
Yeah.
I also had an interview at University of East London.
Mm,
Didn't get offered there, and Surrey, I got the interview outright, but then I was waitlist for a
mm.
place.
Yeah. I was the
Um,
other way around.
so, and again, I think for some people you'd take that, wouldn't you, as maybe not being quite good enough. But for me, I was just so pleased to have got a place
Mm,
that
yeah.
yeah, that I kind of didn't really care. And one
Mm,
of my then friends who I ended up living with, she was the year ahead. And she was very open about the fact that she had been the same. And I
mm,
think, again, that helped me to not feel not good enough.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
but I remember the interview. There were different, and I think different universities were doing it differently. I don't know how it is now, but you'd have like different interviews. So there was a research one where typically you'd kind of get a little scenario of, let's imagine you're going to research this. How would you do it?
Yeah.
And you had a bit of time to prepare that before you went in and talked about it. And then there was a clinical interview where obviously you'd
Mm,
be talking about, I don't know, what might you do with a client who presents like this. And then there was an academic one sometimes. Again, I can't remember quite
mm,
exactly what Surrey did compared to other places. Um,
mm.
I can't
Yeah,
think of
that sounds
one.
similar to what we did. I remember a group exercise um that you had to facilitate a group discussion and they were like analysing how you were in a group environment, and that was a bit scary because I
Yeah, I
thought
would have really struggled with that.
yeah, I'm my kids laugh at me because I always say I'm like a very introverted, quite quiet person naturally, and they're like, no, you're not. But that's how I see myself.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yes. So it worked. Well done. And you got on to training.
So yeah, so waitlist first for
Yeah.
interview, but then I got offered a place straight away for the course, which shocked me.
Mm. But then that was something I remember thinking about a lot, kind of in the early part of my career, how sometimes it seemed to me that there was almost a contradiction between, this is a doctoral level course, like it is intellectually very rigorous, and yet the qualities that make somebody good at being a clinical psychologist, at being with
Mm,
people, that's a different
mm,
set of skills, isn't it?
mm.
Um, and I don't know, I'm not involved. I've never been particularly involved with the courses, but how you, I don't know quite how you balance all of
Mm,
that, because you can't just have like super intelligent people with all the PhDs if they're no good at sitting and having a conversation with somebody, helping
mm,
them
mm,
manage their distress.
mm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's there's quite a mix of skills that you need, aren't there?
definitely. Yeah, but for me, going in, it was that feeling that I shouldn't be there. And I think I talked to many people who still have this, that we're waiting for somebody to say, "Oh, sorry, we sent the letter to the wrong person. It wasn't meant to be you." And this whole imposter thing that stays. But yeah, that difference between, the super bright, intelligent skill, which you do need a high level to be able to get through the academic part of the course, because
Mm,
it's a lot, isn't it, what you have to do academically, or
yes,
as felt like it
yeah.
was. Mm.
And then what did you do after?
So I qualified in 2002. Got married not long after because we decided quite quickly to get married because I was like, well, I've got this doctor now. If I'm changing my name, we need to like do it before I start working.
Okay.
So I was like, because I'm not changing it again. If you get your nice reputation, so
Yes,
looked
yeah.
forward to getting married, having a bit of a break, and then I started working for the trust that I worked all my NHS career, which was I can't remember what it was back in the day. It's Staffordshire Trust. It was one little trust, then it became integrated with three other trusts, and now I think it's probably seven trusts that were
Okay.
there, and now one. So again, the same as my assistant post, I stayed within the same organisation, but my role and the change thing it just kept changing, and the areas kept changing where I worked, either geographically or a little bit with the client group as well. as the NHS kept changing. So
Yes.
service
Yeah.
boundaries had changed, and you would just work with different, slightly different clients.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then how long ago now is it? No, actually, let's talk about the NHS work a little bit more, if that's okay. Because I'm just
Yeah.
aware that a lot of the other clinical psychologists I've spoken to for the channel have been working independently, and so it's
Hmm.
probably good to think a bit about some of that NHS experience.
Yeah.
So, kind of one of those themes would have been lots of structural and organisational change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you working with adults? You working in adult mental health services?
Yeah, I was working with adults. So my first post was in a community mental health team, working on quite a small geographical area with clients that had long-term mental health difficulties. A lot of it was trauma driven, um, some kind of psychosis type presenting problems as well. And we worked, when I first started, we worked within a multidisciplinary team, but also within a psychology department.
Right.
So we used to have the psychology department, and there was 5 or 6 of us qualified psychologists that each fed into a different multidisciplinary team. So we
Mm,
worked together and fed into the team, which was felt to me like a really nice, supportive, containing
yeah. Yeah.
start to my career, which was lovely. And we used to have quite a nice little culture. Everybody got on really well. Everybody had like down tools at 12:30. There was a canteen beneath us. We'd all go and sit and have our lunch together. And some people would come over from forensic department, and it felt really,
Mm,
really positive the first few years of
yes.
being in the
Yeah.
NHS, really.
Really nice.
Mm,
Um, and
yeah.
then what were some of the challenges of working in the NHS?
Things for me changed with all the change that would go on constantly. So I think back of a golden era, the first few years that I was there, like 2002, probably till I went off on mat leave, like 2006. Um, and then we got split to work within the multidisciplinary teams completely. So we were completely embedded with the team. And that brought some challenges with it about role definition,
Hmm.
about hierarchies within the team, with the medic seen as being like um, having the most power, then nurses often feeling hard done by and that they were doing all the crappy work that nobody else wanted to do. And it was just quite challenging dynamics in
Mm,
that way. And we just kept changing the structure, helping things, trying to make things work better. So we were pushed over to another team and then another one. So I think I had like 4 different locations in the end that I was working from. Yeah, and I just never felt that same sense of connection and
yeah.
people on the same page, all trying to do the same thing rather than almost competing against each other for
Mm,
professional status, or I don't really know. It's a long
yeah.
time ago for me now, but it
Yes.
it it felt challenging. And then what was always difficult for me was feeling like you knew that you had skills and experience and things that would help the clients, but there might often be stuff within the service that would say, no, you can't work with that person. Like somebody else has got to work with them, or we've got to transfer them onto another service because they don't fit our criteria. And I get that
Yeah.
on one level from a service perspective, but from a clinical perspective, which is one of the things I love about private practice, it doesn't matter if that client's coming through and you know that you can help
Mm,
them, you can
mm,
help them. You don't have to consider all those other challenges. So I think it was all those other variables that were draining for me.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if we bring you bang up to date, it's been, oh, do I know this? Are we sort of 6, 7 years since you left the NHS?
Yeah, 2019, I left the NHS, November 2019. So, like, was that 6.5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow,
Um,
seems a long time.
yeah,
Mm,
probably feels like a long time. And how is it that long already, all at the
yeah,
same time?
yeah, yeah.
Um, and what have you been doing since?
So I was part-time in the NHS, part-time private practice when I decided to leave. I've been struggling probably for a while anyway, and then my sister with her cancer diagnosis, and then we knew it was terminal. And I think I just went through this phase of just really struggling with life, with work, and not quite knowing where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Um, but at that point, I'd started to train as a EMDR facilitator. So I was helping to train other clinicians in EMDR, and I would love it. There was something so energizing about doing that work. So then I noticed this big split, and even my daughter, that would have been like, 12, 13 at the time, she used to say, like, that she'd notice a difference in how I'd come home and present after my NHS days or my training days. And I was like, oh my God, if other people are noticing, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah. Yes.
So I knew that I loved training. I knew that I was getting burnt out with the NHS. So yeah, I finally, it took me ages to make the decision. I still feel guilty about it now, but left the NHS, building my private practice. Um, and just I started working with Wendy Kendall in the psychology practice accelerator and just looking at how to build a business because I had no clue
Mm,
about, what to do and
yeah.
getting it all set up. Um,
It's not, it's, well, we've talked about this in supervision sessions together, haven't we? That you don't learn about marketing, you don't learn about business skills in
no,
our
no.
training in the NHS because it's not what the NHS needs us to be doing.
No, no. And you don't ever tap into like some of the questions that I constantly like journal on and ask myself now, what do I love? How do I want my typical day to be? What kind of people do I really want to be working with? And all those questions that in the NHS I didn't feel I'd had that much choice around it because I just had to do the job that was needed, and that
Yeah.
wasn't me who was making those decisions. It was somebody else who was saying, this is what you've got to do. So
Mm,
it just felt like there was loads of freedom,
yes.
loads of choice.
Yeah.
Felt really freeing.
So you are now an EMDR trainer. Do you fancy trying to give a little explanation of EMDR for people
Okay.
who might not have any awareness of it at all?
So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's relatively new therapy in the therapy field, really, probably about 30 years. Really, that most people have been using it and using it in the NHS. And I guess the main idea around it is that the problems that we have today are not always actually because of the here and now, they're often because of the there and then and something that has happened in people's past. So EMDR helps us to use an 8 phase treatment protocol that's a great framework for us to identify what has happened to a person that contributes to the problems that they're having now, the mental health difficulties, that then naturally leads on to some future goals and some things that clients want to be different. So EMDR, much of the time, is spent working on past memories of traumatic experiences, whether that's big T events like road traffic accidents, sexual assaults, or small T events like failing your A levels or bullying at school and those kind of things, just identifying how the past is still alive in the present, really. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
So I'm not going to ask you what a typical day or typical week looks like, but because I know that it would be so varied. But I guess a typical month, you might be spending some of those days or like delivering EMDR training for
Hmm.
people and different stages of their EMDR training.
Yeah.
And then a lot of time supervising EMDR
Yeah.
practitioners like myself, um, seeing clients, delivering EMDR,
Hmm.
and potentially maybe other bits of therapy might get a look in somewhere. Is that fair? Are those the three main things that you spend
Yeah,
your
and
time doing?
the other main thing is my EMDR-informed coaching school. So I really reflective of my whole journey from leaving the NHS to building a private practice that I love to work in now, has been around using EMDR, using coaching. So I've kind of amalgamated that together and developed a program that I use with clients and also now teach other therapists about how they can bring EMDR into like well-being and personal growth and performance. So
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time at the moment working within that.
Yes. And the difference there compared to sort of EMDR therapy might be if we think of therapy, and I know this is a massive oversimplification, but therapy is perhaps overcoming problems and
Mm,
coaching more kind of building strengths, building resilience and confidence, kind of
yeah.
performance enhancement.
Yeah, and working
Uh,
towards growth. So I think while we still see the past as being significant and important, it's a much like lighter touch and gentler touch on the past. So in the uplift breakthrough model that I work within, the framework that I've developed, we spend a lot of time really focusing on the change and the growth and the forward focus stuff that people want. We tap in a bit to the past to sever some of the connections, but generally that's all we need to do. We don't need to spend hours and hours in the past, which is what we would do in our therapy models.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Oh,
just bringing a different frame to EMDR. But
yeah.
yeah, in the same way as back in 2019 when I was feeling so inspired and passionate about being a facilitator and training, and I still love that as well. But I've got that energy now around the EMDR Informed Coaching School. So I think
Yeah.
that's the thing about being a psychologist, that you keep developing new interests and passion, and you've got to go where that flows really. And I think that's a big lesson for me over the years in tapping into that in me rather than connecting with what's expected of me or what other people think I should do. What is it that's really lighting me up? What field am I loving working in?
Yeah. I feel the same. It's a privilege, isn't it, that our
Yeah,
work can evolve. And I love thinking, what I do now is not what I was doing 10 years ago. It's not what I thought I'd be doing now. And
yeah,
I'm really intrigued to see what I'll be doing in another 10 years' time. Um,
yeah, yes.
yes. Um, what would you say is something that people sometimes misunderstand about what you do? What are some of the kind of myths that you find yourself debunking with people?
I think the one that's straight on the top of my mind is that everybody thinks that because you're a psychologist, you can read their mind and figure out what's going on for them. Even last night, I was out with some friends, and they said, "Oh, about their husband. Oh, he always thinks if you give him a look that you know exactly what he's thinking." And I'm like, I wish I did, but no, I don't. So it's that idea that you can read minds is one of the biggest
Yeah,
myths, I suppose.
yeah.
Mm.
Just sort of looking at my questions here, I feel like we've covered a lot of these things. What would be your top tips for students who are thinking that they might be interested in becoming psychologists?
Oh, okay. What? Mm. I think something about if you've got a flame there, try and fan that as much as you can, and read around it, go and talk to people that are working in that field. I never had the confidence to do that, and looking back, I wished I would have just been a bit more assertive because most people will happily answer questions, or you can get access to stuff online a lot as well, can't you? Um, yeah, I I went down the voluntary route and found that really helpful. Like when I look back to working for the helpline in a voluntary
Mhm.
capacity, I felt that opened up a lot. So get as much experience as you can. Um, But the balance here is without feeling like you're like being taken advantage of or used and abused in some ways, because you don't ever want to advocate that people just like work for free and do nothing. But equally, you appreciate that, you might have to go that extra mile and follow those pathways and I don't know, do things that are going to be beneficial for you. So I guess it's just thinking about what is benefiting you and your long-term aims.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, talking with people, getting as much experience as you can. Some things that I say, I was talking with somebody recently. Well, I've had a couple of conversations with different people, and talking about that voluntary experience. Like I feel very uneasy about kind of some of the full time unpaid
Yes, yes. In mine
internships that
was,
we see.
yeah,
But what I was saying to somebody is it might be a day's shadowing, or
yeah, yeah,
it might be a couple of hours once a fortnight. Something that would fit around people's other responsibilities. That it's
yeah,
not that it's not that you need hours and hours and hours and hours of
yeah,
experience, but sometimes like I say, yeah, a day's shadowing, and
yeah.
then really thinking about what did I learn, what did I see, what surprised me.
And being reflective, having that thinking about that meta level, isn't it? Which I think is a big psychological skill that you always need. Yeah, see, when I did the mental health helpline, we had 6 weeks of training before we started offering anything. So that felt like, even though it was voluntary, you were getting something because you got the training, and the training in itself was really valuable.
Yeah, yeah, and of course the great thing with volunteering is you're not tied to it in the same way as a job, are you? And great when it can be mutually beneficial.
Yeah. But learning from, like, my job was in and a home for people with learning disabilities, and there wasn't any psychologists in there. I think the company had been set up by a psychologist. Most people were caring staff, so it wasn't necessarily that they were doing psychological work, but of course they were doing psychological work. So it's like, how can you get experiences and bring on board your psychologist eyes into it and be reflective? What am I learning here? What could be different?
Yeah,
What do
yeah,
people need?
brilliant.
Yeah. Mm.
Hannah, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share?
I just feel I've waffled forever. But it's been lovely because you forget this journey, and I do often think about it. And Steve Jobs always says this thing about you can't connect the dots going forwards, but then you look back and you can see what seems like a linear pathway to where you are now, but it's not, because it's all over the place. So it's been
Yeah,
nice to connect the dots, reflect back, appreciate that it feels linear when we talk about it, but know that in the moment, when I was like 1 year into my assistant's post, desperately applying for other posts and applying for the course, that it didn't feel like give myself 12 months and I'm going to get on. So I guess, yeah, not that it's anything that we've missed, but that really connects with um, encouraging people to enjoy what they're doing and appreciate that, as well as keeping their eyes on the end goal.
yeah, it's kind of trusting the process, isn't it? Katie, that I was talking with last week, whose video I've shared, I don't remember how many years, but she spent like maybe 7 or 8 years kind
Mm,
of getting experience working in support worker roles, or it's a memory test, maybe some assistant psychologist roles. But, it took a lot longer than I did. But she was very much enjoying the process,
mm,
wasn't in a rush, and
mm,
was reflecting on how much that actually helped her when she did start her training, that she
mm,
had all of that experience to
mm,
draw on.
mm,
Um, Seems like a
yeah,
great place to have come from.
mm,
So yeah, that sounds like a really big theme from your story of kind of trusting the process. That yeah,
mm,
there's going to be some bumps in the road, um, but
mm,
it'll
mm,
if you keep going, keep thinking about it, keep talking with people, you'll get to where you want to be.
mm,
So
yeah.
thank you. I will stop the recording there,
You
and
are
thank you
very
so much
welcome.
for your time.
You're welcome.